The sound of the judge's gavel hitting the desk echoed in the courtroom like thunder, but it wasn't as loud as my own heartbeat. After 15 years of raising my grandchildren as if they were my own kids, my daughter Laura appeared out of nowhere. She had an expensive lawyer with her accusing me of kidnapping. She didn't even look her abandoned children in the eye. Her gaze was fixed only on me and the yellow envelope I held in my shaking hands, an envelope that held the truth she never imagined I would keep for so long. But before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to Elderly Stories and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Rose Martin. I'm 63 years old, and I never imagined I'd be in a courtroom in my 60s fighting for custody of my grandchildren against my own daughter. The same daughter who 15 years ago left 2 small children on my doorstep, promising to be back in a few days. I just need to sort some things out, Mom. Can you watch them? It'll be really quick, I promise. That was the last thing Laura said to me before getting into a taxi and disappearing for 15 long years. Matthew was barely 4 years old back then. His little sister Sophia had just turned 2. They were dirty, hungry, and scared. Sophia cried nonstop, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, while Matthew just stared at me with big, confused eyes. "Is Mom coming back soon?" he asked me that night after I bathed them, fed them, and put them to bed in the guest room. "Of course, sweetie," I answered, praying it was true. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and the months into years. No calls, no letters, no messages. It was like Laura had vanished into thin air. At first, I tried to find her. I called the few friends I knew. She had checked hospitals. I even went to the police, but the answer was always the same. "She's an adult, ma'am. If there's no sign of a crime, we can't do anything." So I took on the task of raising my grandchildren. It wasn't easy. I was already 48 years old at the time, a widow for 5 years, living on my modest teacher's pension. I had to start tutoring again to supplement our income. I enrolled the kids in the neighborhood school, took them to the pediatrician, bought clothes, toys, school supplies. I learned how to braid Sophia's hair, how to play soccer with Matthew, how to tell them bedtime stories to chase away the frequent nightmares. In the first few weeks, the kids cried for their mother every night. Sophia, being younger, adapted more quickly, but Matthew struggled. He refused to eat, had temper tantrums, wet the bed. The pediatrician recommended a child psychologist. "It's normal," explained Dr. Evans. "He's dealing with the abandonment the only way he knows how. We need to help him process these feelings." It was around that time I decided to apply for legal custody. I needed authorization to make medical decisions, enroll them in school, put them on my health plan. The judge assigned to the case, Judge Linda Johnson, was a sensible and compassionate woman. "Mrs. Martin, we made every legal attempt to locate your daughter," she told me during the hearing. "We published notices, we notified the proper agency. In the absence of a response, and considering the documented material and actual abandonment, I am granting you provisional custody of the children." Thus began our life as an unconventional family, a grandmother and her 2 grandchildren building a home from the ashes of abandonment. Time passed. Matthew grew into a tall, slim teenager, passionate about science. Sophia, a sweet, artistic girl, always had a sketchbook under her arm. The questions about their mother lessened over the years, but they never stopped completely. "Grandma, why did Mom never come back?" Sophia asked me when she was 10 while I was braiding her hair for school. "Honey, sometimes adults have problems they can't solve," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "That doesn't mean she didn't love you." "But it's been 8 years," Sophia insisted, her small voice full of pain. "I know, sweetie, I know." What could I say? How do you explain to a child that her own mother abandoned her without looking back? How do you justify the unjustifiable? The provisional custody became permanent when the children turned 7 without any word from their mother. I had saved every piece of our history in a yellow envelope. Photos from the day they arrived, dirty and scared. The drawings they made for the mother who never returned. School and medical records. And most importantly, the one letter Laura sent 3 months after she left. A letter I never showed the kids because I knew it would break their hearts. "Mom, don't look for me anymore. I'm starting a new life far away from there. The kids will be better off with you than with me. You were always a better mother than I'll ever be. Don't tell them, but it's better if they forget me." That letter, written on cheap paper in Laura's hurried handwriting, would be our salvation many years later. Because on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when Sophia was 17 and Matthew was 19, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. Laura was there standing on my porch as if 15 years hadn't passed. Next to her, a man in a dark suit held a leather briefcase and stared at me with cold, calculating eyes. "Mom," Laura said, her voice void of emotion, "I've come to get my children." Time froze in that moment. Laura looked different. Shorter hair, some wrinkles around her eyes, expensive clothes that I could never afford on my pension. But it was still her, my daughter, the same face that looked at me from the photographs I kept hidden so as not to confuse the children. Your children, I repeated, feeling like I'd been slapped. Your children you abandoned 15 years ago. The man beside her cleared his throat, handing me a document. Mrs. Martin, I'm Paul Miller, your daughter's attorney. These are the documents requesting the restoration of custody of the minors, Matthew and Sophia, to their biological mother. I took the papers with trembling hands, unable to process what was happening. You can't just show up after 15 years and demand they come back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They don't even know you anymore, Laura. I am their mother, she replied coldly. I have legal rights. It was then that I heard a noise behind me. Sophia was standing in the hallway, her face pale as paper. She had just gotten home from school and had heard everything. Mom, her voice was just a whisper. Laura's eyes widened slightly when she saw her daughter, now a young adult, not the baby she had left behind. For a second, I saw something that might have been emotion cross her face, but it vanished just as quickly. Sophia, she said, trying to smile. Look how much you've grown. Sophia didn't move. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes scanning the face of the woman she only knew from a few faded photographs. Why are you here now? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Before Laura could answer, we heard the front door open again. It was Matthew coming home from college. He stopped in the entryway, his backpack slipping from his shoulder as he took in the scene. What's going on? He asked, looking between me and Laura. Matthew, this is... I started to say, but Laura interrupted me. I'm your mother, she said, taking a step toward him. Matthew flinched instinctively. His eyes narrowed, analyzing Laura's face as if he were studying a strange specimen in one of his biology classes. My mother, he repeated, his voice thick with a bitterness that broke my heart. You abandoned us when I was 4 years old. My mother is my Grandma Rose. Laura looked stunned for a moment, but the lawyer quickly stepped in. Young man, we understand this is a difficult situation, but your biological mother is here to resume her role. She went through difficult circumstances that prevented her from being present, but now she is ready to reassume her responsibilities. Matthew let out a humorless laugh. Responsibilities? After 15 years? He shook his head. Grandma, what's happening? I took a deep breath, trying to regain my balance. Maybe we should continue this conversation inside, I suggested, though the last thing I wanted was to let Laura and her lawyer into our home. We led everyone into the living room, a modest but cozy space filled with framed photos capturing important moments in the kids' lives. Matthew's high school graduation, Sophia winning an art contest, birthdays, Christmases, trips to Central Park. 15 years of memories that Laura was not a part of. I sat on the sofa next to my grandchildren, instinctively placing myself between them and Laura, who sat in the armchair across from us, her lawyer at her side like an expensive bodyguard. Let's get straight to the point, Mr. Miller said, opening his briefcase. My client never legally relinquished custody of her children. Mrs. Rose Martin obtained temporary custody, which became permanent under allegations of abandonment, but there was no formal process of terminating parental rights. Why did she disappear? I exclaimed, outraged. How could we notify her of a process if she vanished without leaving an address? That's exactly the point, ma'am, the lawyer continued, unbothered. My client was not properly notified, and now she is ready to resume her parental rights. But why now? Sophia asked, her voice small and shaky. Why after all this time? Laura shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I wasn't well when I left you with Grandma. She began reciting what sounded like a rehearsed speech. I was going through a difficult time, depression. No money, no support. I thought you'd be better off with her than with me. And what changed now? Matthew asked, crossing his arms. Now I'm stable. I have a good job, a nice house in Chicago. I can give them a better life, better opportunities. Something in the way she spoke didn't feel sincere. Her eyes avoided ours, focusing on some distant point on the wall behind us. And how did you know where to find us after all this time? I asked, a suspicion growing in my chest. Laura and her lawyer exchanged a quick glance. I always knew where you were, she answered vaguely. But I knew my daughter. I knew when she was lying, and right then she was lying. It was Sophia who broke the tense silence that followed. I don't want to go, she said simply. Me neither, Matthew added. Our life is here with Grandma. The lawyer smiled condescendingly. We understand this is an emotionally complex situation for you, but legally, your mother has priority in custody, especially in Sophia's case, who is still a minor. I felt my blood run cold. Were they right? After everything I'd been through, after 15 years of raising these children, would the law still favor the woman who abandoned them? We are going to handle this the right way, the lawyer continued. We have a hearing scheduled with Judge Arthur Foster for next week. Until then, I recommend you prepare the children for the transition. Transition? I repeated in disbelief. You talk as if we're dealing with objects, not people with feelings and their own free will. Laura finally looked at me directly. Mom, don't make this harder than it already is. I know you took good care of them, but they are my children. That's when something inside me snapped. Your children. My voice came out louder than I intended. Where were you when Sophia had pneumonia at age 6 and we had to spend 3 nights in the hospital? Where were you when Matthew was bullied in school because he didn't have a mother to show up on Mother's Day? Where were you on all the nights they cried out for you? Matthew put his hand on my shoulder, trying to calm me. Grandma. But I couldn't stop. 15 years of repressed pain were finally coming out. Do you have any idea what it's like to explain to a 5-year-old boy why his mother never came back? Do you have any idea of the emotional scars you left on them? Laura stood up abruptly. That's why I'm here now, to fix things. There's nothing to fix, Matthew replied, his voice strangely calm. We built our life without you. We're fine. You don't understand, Laura said, her voice betraying a hint of desperation. I can give you so much more than what you have. A private school for Sophia, a better college for you, Matthew, Tripp's designer clothes, a bright future. It was then that I realized this wasn't about motherly love. It was about something else. What happened, Laura? I asked slowly. Why, after 15 years of absolute silence, do you suddenly show up wanting your children back? What really changed? Before she could answer, the lawyer chimed in again. Mrs. Martin, I suggest you hire an attorney to represent you. In the meantime, it would be wise to start preparing the minors for the change. They got up to leave, but before they reached the door, I spoke. You are not taking my grandchildren anywhere, not without a fight. Mr. Miller smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. We'll see about that, ma'am. We'll see. After Laura and her lawyer left, a heavy silence fell over the house. Sophia ran to her room and slammed the door while Matthew stayed in the living room, his expression blank, as if still trying to process what had happened. She can't just show up and take us, can she? Grandma? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. I sat beside him, trying to sound more confident than I felt. No, sweetie. It won't be that simple. But inside, I was terrified. Despite having legal custody for years, I knew that courts often favored biological parents. What if the judge decided Laura deserved a second chance? What if he didn't consider 15 years of abandonment reason enough to keep her away from the children? That night, after Matthew and Sophia went to bed, though I doubted either of them would actually sleep, I called my friend Cecilia, who was a lawyer. It wasn't her area of expertise, but she could give me some initial guidance. Rose, I'm not going to lie to you, she said after I explained the situation. Cases like this are complicated. The fact that you've had legal custody for so many years plays in your favor, but she is the biological mother. She abandoned them, Cecilia, for 15 years. I know, and that carries a lot of weight, but you're going to need concrete proof of the abandonment. Records of contact attempts, the letter you mentioned, witnesses who can confirm your story. What about their wishes? Matthew is already an adult, and Sophia is 17. Don't they have a right to decide Matthew does being an adult? In Sophia's case, the judge will listen to her opinion, but it's not guaranteed to be the deciding factor. I thanked Cecilia and hung up. Right away, I went to my closet and pulled out an old box where I kept the yellow envelope with all our memories and documents. I spent the night going through every paper, every photograph, every record. If Laura wanted a war, I would be ready. The next morning, I found Sophia in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. I can't even look at her, Sophia said as I made coffee. How can she think she has the right to just come back like this? I put a cup of hot chocolate in front of her and sat down. Honey, I need you to be strong right now. We're going to have to face this together as a family. But it's so unfair. She left us like we were trash. And now she shows up with that expensive lawyer talking about private school and designer clothes. Sophia was right. There was something strange about Laura's sudden return. My daughter had never been maternal even when she still lived with us. I remembered how she complained about the responsibilities, how she would leave the kids alone for hours while she went out with friends, how she always seemed to resent the duties of motherhood. There's something she's not telling us, I commented more to myself than to Sophia. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. That afternoon, I hired a private investigator. Frank was an ex-cop who now worked for himself, recommended by Cecilia. He wasn't cheap, and I'd have to use part of my savings, but I needed to understand the real reason for Laura's return. I need you to find out everything about her life for the past few years. I explained. Where she works, who she lives with, and most importantly, why she decided to come back now. Frank nodded, taking notes. I'll need as much information as you have on her. Last known address, names of friends, anything that can give me a starting point. I gave him what little I knew and the address listed on the documents the lawyer had left. Frank promised results in a few days. Meanwhile, the hearing date was approaching. I hired Mr. Richard, a lawyer specializing in family law, recommended by Cecilia. He didn't give me false hope, but he promised to do everything possible. The prolonged abandonment is a very strong factor in our favor, he explained during our first consultation, but we need to be prepared for any argument they might present. The day before the hearing, Frank called me. Mrs. Rose, I found some interesting information about your daughter. My heart sped up. What did you discover? Laura is in serious financial trouble. She works as a manager at a department store, but she has massive debts. Her apartment is mortgaged and she's behind on payments. That doesn't make sense, I replied, confused. She showed up here talking about private schools and expensive colleges as if she had plenty of money. There's more, Frank continued. 3 weeks ago, she received a notification. It was tucked among the documents on her table. I got a picture of it when I visited the apartment pretending to be a delivery guy. What kind of notification? From the law firm Almeida and Franco. It's about an inheritance. I felt my stomach drop. Inheritance. Yes, ma'am. Your brother Charles Martin passed away 2 months ago. With no children, he left a considerable part of his assets to his nephew and niece, Matthew and Sophia. The world stopped. My brother Charles had been living abroad for decades. We kept in little contact, but he always sent gifts on important dates for the children. I had heard news of his death, of course, but I didn't know the details of the will. How much? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Approximately $500,000 for each of them, but there's a condition. The money can only be accessed when they turn 21, unless it's for educational expenses with the approval of their legal guardian. It all made sense suddenly. Laura wasn't interested in reconnecting with her children. She wanted the money. Frank, can you prove this? Can you get documents showing she only showed up after learning about the inheritance? I'm already working on it. The notification is from 3 weeks ago, and she hired the lawyer 2 days later. I'm trying to get the phone records to prove she contacted the Almeida and Franco firm before initiating the custody request. Do it as fast as you can. The hearing is tomorrow. I hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. My own daughter was trying to use her children to get her hands on an inheritance, the same children she had abandoned without a backward glance 15 years ago. Matthew knocked softly on my bedroom door. Grandma, are you okay? I heard you talking on the phone. I looked at my grandson now, a young, intelligent, and sensitive man, and I felt a wave of protection wash over me. I would not let Laura hurt these children again. I would not let her use them as tools to solve her financial problems. Everything is fine, sweetie, I replied, trying to smile. I'm just getting ready for tomorrow. We're scared, he confessed, sitting beside me. Sophia can't even sleep well. I know I'm scared too, but we're going to face this together like we always have. Matthew nodded, but his eyes were filled with worry. What if we lose? What if the judge makes Sophia go with her? She's only 17, Grandma. We're not going to lose, I affirmed with more confidence than I felt. I have an ace up my sleeve. That night I took the yellow envelope out of the box and reviewed every document one more time. Laura's letter, the school records, the photos from the day they arrived. I added the documents Frank had sent me about the inheritance, and then carefully I put everything back in the envelope and sealed it. Tomorrow would be the day I faced my own daughter in court, the day I would fight for the right to continue being the mother to the children she abandoned, the day the truth would come out. Before sleeping, I made one last call to Frank. Did you get the phone records? Better than that, he replied. I managed to record a conversation between Laura and her lawyer. You need to hear this. The city's Palace of Justice was an imposing building of concrete and glass that had always intimidated me. That morning, however, I was determined not to show fear. I wore my best outfit, a navy blue skirt and a blazer I saved for special occasions, and I pulled my gray hair back into an elegant bun. I wanted to look dignified and responsible in the judge's eyes. Matthew and Sophia also dressed formally, my grandson in a dress shirt and dark pants, and Sophia in a simple but appropriate dress. We were united, ready to face what was coming. Our lawyer, Mr. Richard, met us at the entrance. He seemed confident, but I noticed the worry in his eyes as he greeted us. I managed to include the new documents you sent me last night, he said in a low voice, but I can't guarantee the judge will accept them. They were submitted very last minute. He has to accept them, I replied firmly. It's proof that Laura is lying about her intention. We entered the courtroom, and I immediately saw Laura and her lawyer already seated on the other side. She wore an elegant dress and careful makeup, looking the part of the responsible mother she wanted to project. When she saw us, she tried to smile at Matthew and Sophia, but they both looked away. Judge Arthur Foster was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious expression. He entered the room and we all rose in respect. "Be seated," he ordered, opening a folder of documents. "We are here to address the custody modification process for the minors Matthew and Sophia Martin. I see we have legal representatives from both parties. Let's begin." Mr. Miller was the first to speak, presenting Laura's case with rehearsed eloquence. "Your Honor, my client Laura Martin is the biological mother of these young people. 15 years ago, she went through a difficult period of delayed postpartum depression and financial problems that forced her to temporarily leave her children in the care of their grandmother. Temporarily, I almost choked on the word. 15 years was hardly temporary. During that period," he continued, "my client sought treatment, restructured her life, and is now emotionally and financially stable, ready to resume her role as a mother. She never formally relinquished custody of her children and now wishes to exercise her maternal rights." The judge listened intently, taking notes. Then he turned to Mr. Richard. "The defense may present its arguments." Our lawyer stood up, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. 15 years ago, Laura Martin left her children on her mother's doorstep and disappeared. There were no calls, no letters, or any kind of contact. My client, Rose Martin, raised these children alone with her own resources, providing love, education, and stability." He paused dramatically. "During those 15 years, Mrs. Rose obtained legal custody through the proper channels. She attempted to locate her daughter by all possible means, including newspaper ads as required by law. Matthew and Sophia built their lives, considering their grandmother as their true mother, and now suddenly, after 15 years of complete abandonment, Laura Martin reappears demanding custody." The judge turned to Laura. "Mrs. Martin, can you explain why you remained out of contact with your children for so long?" Laura shifted in her chair and cleared her throat, trying to appear vulnerable and repentant. "Your Honor, I was in a very difficult place in my life. I was suffering from severe depression and was in no condition emotionally or financially to care for my children. Leaving them with my mother was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I believed it was for the best until I could recover." "And it took you 15 years to recover?" the judge asked, raising an eyebrow. I had relapses," she replied, avoiding the judge's gaze. "I moved to a new city, tried to rebuild my life. When I was finally stable, I was afraid to come back. Afraid they would hate me, that my mother had turned the children against me. I almost stood up to protest, but Mr. Richard placed a gentle hand on my arm, silencing me." "And what changed now?" the judge continued. "Why did you decide to return at this specific moment?" Laura hesitated for a second, so quickly that only someone who knew her well would notice. "I realized that time was passing, and I was missing the important moments in my children's lives. I wanted to reconnect with them before it was too late." "Too late for what exactly?" the judge pressed. "To build a bond, to get to know them," she replied quickly. "To be a mother to them." The judge nodded, showing no sign of whether he believed her or not. He then turned to me. "Mrs. Rose Martin, can you describe what it was like raising your grandchildren all these years?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize 15 years of memories into a few sentences. "In the beginning, it was difficult. I was already 48 when they arrived, a widow living on a modest pension. I had to go back to tutoring to supplement my income, but they never lacked anything essential: food on the table, clean clothes, medical care. Most importantly, they never lacked love." I looked at my grandchildren, feeling emotional. Matthew struggled a lot at first. He had nightmares, wet the bed, constantly asked for his mother. Sophia was very young. She adapted more easily, but she also had her moments. I sought psychological help for both of them. I attended every school meeting, birthday party, presentation. I was present for every important moment of their lives. "Did you try to locate your daughter during that period?" "Yes, Your Honor. I called the friends I knew she had checked. Hospitals, went to the police. When I started the custody request, the court published notices in newspapers as required by law. There was never any response." The judge flipped through some pages in his file. "I see you obtained provisional custody, which became permanent after 7 years of no contact from the biological mother." "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to my grandchildren. "I would like to hear from the young people now. Matthew, how do you feel about this process?" Matthew stood up, looking much older than his 19 years. "Your Honor, my mother is my grandmother. She was the one who raised me, who was by my side when I was sick, who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with my homework. Mrs. Laura is just the woman who gave birth to me and then abandoned me." Laura visibly paled at her son's harsh words. "I understand you're hurt. the judge intervened. "But what is your opinion on the possibility of resuming contact with your biological mother? You are an adult and can decide for yourself." "I don't want contact with her," Matthew replied firmly. "I don't trust her, and I don't understand why she's doing this now, after so much time." The judge nodded and turned to my granddaughter. "And you, Sophia, I know you're only 17, but your opinion is important." Sophia stood up, trembling slightly. She was always quieter, more sensitive than her brother. "I was very little when she left us," Sophia said, her voice low but firm. "I don't have many memories of her, just what Grandma told me and a few photographs. To me, my grandmother is my real mother. I don't want to go live with a stranger." "I am not a stranger, I am your mother," Laura exclaimed, unable to contain herself. "Mrs. Martin, please," the judge warned. "Do not interrupt." Sophia continued now, looking directly at Laura. "Where were you when I needed someone to help me with my first bra, or when I got my first period and was scared, or when I was bullied in school for not having a mother on Mother's Day?" Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now, but her voice remained controlled. "Grandma was there always. You are a stranger to me." A heavy silence fell over the room as Sophia returned to her seat. The judge cleared his throat, clearly affected by the testimony. "Well, I believe the positions are clear. I would like to review some documents before proceeding." It was at that moment that our lawyer spoke up. "Your Honor, there are new elements we would like to present to the court. Documents that may shed light on Mrs. Laura Martin's true motivations for returning after 15 years. Laura's lawyer immediately stood up. "I object, Your Honor. We were not notified of any new evidence. They were discovered last night," Mr. Richard explained. "We believe they are crucial to understanding this case." The judge considered for a moment. "I will allow it, but with the caveat that the other party will have the right to respond after analyzing the documents." Mr. Richard approached and handed the yellow envelope to the judge. "This envelope contains proof that Mrs. Laura Martin only returned after learning of a substantial inheritance left by Charles Martin, the children's uncle, who passed away 2 months ago." Laura jumped up abruptly. "That's absurd. I didn't even know about that inheritance." "Ma'am, sit down," the judge ordered. "I will analyze the documents before any conclusions." He opened the envelope carefully and began to examine its contents. First, the photographs of when the children arrived at my house dirty and scared. Then Laura's letter dated 3 months after her departure, stating she wanted no more contact. The school and medical records showing my constant care over the years. Finally, the most recent documents. The notification from the Almeida and Franco law firm about the inheritance dated 3 weeks ago, and the phone records showing Laura had contacted the law firm just 2 days later. There was also the transcript of a recorded conversation between Laura and her lawyer. As the judge read, Laura's face grew paler and paler. She whispered furiously with her lawyer, who seemed equally disturbed. After a few minutes of silent reading, the judge looked up. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Richard. Are you suggesting that Mrs. Laura Martin is trying to regain custody of her children just to gain access to the inheritance left by their uncle?" "Exactly, Your Honor. As you can see in the documents, the will specifies that the money can only be accessed by the young people when they turn 21, unless it's for educational expenses approved by the legal guardian." The judge turned to Laura, his expression now visibly severe. "Mrs. Martin, what do you have to say about this?" Laura seemed to have been caught off guard. She opened her mouth several times before managing to speak. I didn't know about the inheritance when I decided to look for my children," she finally said, but her voice betrayed her lie. "This is just a coincidence." "A very convenient coincidence," the judge commented, "especially considering that according to these phone records, you contacted the Almeida and Franco firm the day after receiving the notification, and 2 days later you hired Mr. Miller to begin the custody recovery process. I can explain that. And this recording," the judge continued, picking up another document, "a conversation between you and your lawyer where you explicitly discuss how to use the inheritance money to pay your debts. You are quoted as saying, 'Once I have custody, I can use their education money to pay the mortgage on the apartment. It's an educational emergency. They need a roof over their heads, right?'" A murmur went through the room. Matthew and Sophia looked at Laura with expressions of shock and disgust. That's out of context," Laura stammered, now visibly panicking. Her lawyer stood up, trying to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, we question the legality of that recording. It was obtained without consent, and therefore should not be admitted as evidence. The recording was made in a public place in the cafe near the gentleman's office," Mr. Richard replied. "According to current case law, conversations in public places have no expectation of privacy, especially when they involve potential fraud." The judge looked increasingly disturbed as he continued reading the documents. "Mrs. Laura Martin he said finally. "This evidence raises serious questions about your true intentions. Added to the history of prolonged abandonment and the clear preference stated by the young people, I have sufficient grounds to make a decision." My heart was beating so hard, I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I held the hands of Matthew and Sophia, who sat closer to me. "Based on the evidence presented, and in the best interest of the young people involved," the judge continued, "I am maintaining permanent custody of Sophia with her grandmother Rose Martin until she reaches the age of majority. As for Matthew being already of age, he has the right to decide for himself and has clearly stated his wish to remain with his grandmother." I felt such immense relief that tears began to stream down my face. Matthew squeezed my hand tightly while Sophia sobbed quietly beside me. But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, considering the clear attempt to manipulate the judicial system for financial gain, I am issuing a restraining order against Laura Martin, prohibiting her from coming within 100 yards of Rose Matthew and Sophia Martin for a period of 1 year." Laura looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "The court will also notify the district attorney's office about a possible fraud attempt for further investigation." The judge banged his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." As we stood up still in shock from the victory, Laura advanced toward us, ignoring her lawyer's protests. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, pointing at me. "You turned my children against me. They are mine, not yours." Security guards quickly approached, restraining her before she reached us. As they escorted her out, she continued to scream accusations. Matthew put a protective arm around my shoulders. "Let's go home, Grandma," he said gently. "It's over." But I knew, looking at my daughter's face twisted in rage as she was led away, that maybe it wasn't completely over. The months following the hearing were about readjustment and healing. Although we had won the case, Laura's sudden reappearance and all the revelations about her true intentions had left deep wounds, especially in Sophia. "Why does she hate us so much?" my granddaughter asked one night as I braided her hair before bed, a ritual we had kept since she was little. "She doesn't hate you, dear," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Laura always had trouble dealing with her emotions and responsibilities. The problem was never you. It was always her. But to try and use us like that for money, some people when they're desperate do terrible things. That doesn't make what she did right, but maybe it helps to understand." Sophia was silent for a moment, absorbing my words. "Do you think she'll ever change? That she'll want to know us for real?" The question took me by surprise. Despite everything, there was still a small part of Sophia that longed for the mother she never had. "I don't know, sweetie. People can change, but only if they really want to. The important thing is that regardless of what happens with Laura, you have a family that loves you unconditionally." It was true. Our little family was more united than ever. Matthew had resumed his studies with renewed enthusiasm, determined to build a bright future. Sophia, though still processing the events, was dedicating herself to her art with more intensity, transforming her emotions into beauty through her drawings. I was trying to move on too, but a part of me still ached for Laura. Despite her betrayal, she was still my daughter. Where had I gone wrong in raising her that she could become a person capable of abandoning her own children and then trying to use them for financial gain? 3 months after the trial, we heard news about Laura through Mr. Richard. She had lost her apartment due to accumulated debts and was temporarily living with a friend. The district attorney's office had decided not to press fraud charges, considering she hadn't actually received any money from the inheritance. Despite everything, I felt sorry for her. On an impulse that surprised even me, I picked up the phone and called the number Mr. Richard had given me. A cautious voice answered on the other end. "Hello? Laura, it's Mom." Silence. For a moment, I thought she would hang up. "What do you want?" Her voice sounded harsh, defensive. "I just wanted to know how you are." A bitter laugh came from the other side. "How am I? I lost my apartment. My lawyer dropped me after I couldn't pay him, and I have a court order preventing me from seeing my own children. How do you think I am?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I had called. "I'm very sorry about all of this, Laura. I truly am. You're so sorry you used that recording against me in court. I did what I had to do to protect Matthew and Sophia, just as you did what you thought was necessary to solve your financial problems." Another silence, longer this time. "Why are you calling, really?" she finally asked, her voice a little less hostile. "Because despite everything, you are still my daughter. And because I believe that maybe with time, you can build some kind of relationship with your children, one based on genuine love, not financial interests." Laura sighed heavily. "They hate me now. They are hurt and confused. That's different from hate. Sophia seemed to hate me enough in court. Sophia is 17 and just found out that the mother who abandoned her only came back because of money. What did you expect?" More silence. I'm willing to help, I continued, if you're genuinely interested in getting to know them and building a real relationship with them, but it has to be on their terms when they're ready. And the money? She asked, her voice suddenly anxious. I closed my eyes, disappointed but not surprised that her first concern was still financial. The inheritance is in a trust. Matthew can access it when he turns 21 in 2 years. Sophia at 21 as well. It's their money, Laura, not mine, not yours. I'm their mother, she protested weakly, a mother who abandoned them for 15 years. I replied more harshly than I intended. I took a deep breath, controlling myself. Look, I didn't call to argue. If you truly want to be part of their lives, you'll need to prove you've changed, that you care about them as people, not as access to an inheritance. And how do I do that with a restraining order? We can start with letters. Write to them. Tell them about your life. Ask about theirs. No pressure. No demands, just communication. And you would deliver those letters? There was distrust in her voice. Yes, and if they want to reply, I'll send their answers back too. There was a long moment of silence before she finally answered. I'll think about it. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I hung up the phone with mixed feelings, hope that Laura could actually change, fear that she could hurt Matthew and Sophia again, and a strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, we were taking the first steps toward healing. That night I told Matthew and Sophia about the call. As expected, their reactions were different. Matthew was immediately suspicious. She only wants to get close because of the money, Grandma. We can't trust her. Sophia, on the other hand, seemed cautiously curious. What exactly did she say? Did she ask about us? I recounted the conversation as faithfully as possible, not omitting the part about the money. They deserved the whole truth. I suggested she start by writing letters, I concluded, with no pressure for you to respond if you don't want to. I don't want to read anything from her, Matthew declared firmly. Maybe, Sophia said hesitantly. Not now, but maybe in the future. I hugged them both, proud of the maturity with which they were handling the situation. There's no right or wrong decision here, I assured them. You have every right to define who is part of your lives and on what terms. The following week, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside were 2 letters, one for Matthew and one for Sophia, and a small note for me. Mom, I decided to try your way. I don't know if they'll want to read them, but I needed to try. Laura. I showed the letters to the grandchildren that night. Matthew immediately handed his back to me. You can throw it away or send it back. I don't want to read it. Sophia took hers, turning the envelope over in her hands for a long moment. Can I think about it? Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. 3 days later, Sophia came to me with the letter still sealed. Grandma, I think I want to read it, but can you read it with me? We sat together on the sofa, and Sophia carefully opened the envelope. The letter was short, written on simple paper. Sophia, I don't know where to begin. You probably hate me now, and you have every right. What I did was unforgivable, both abandoning you when you were little and trying to come back for the wrong reasons. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that despite everything I always thought of you, I keep a baby picture of you in my wallet. You had the most curious eyes I'd ever seen. I'd like to get to know the person you've become. Your grandmother told me you like to draw. I used to like it too when I was your age. Maybe it's something in our blood. If you ever want to talk, even just to tell me how much you hate me, I'll be here. Laura, your mother, even if I don't deserve that title. Sophia read the letter 3 times in silence, tears streaming down her face. What do you think? I asked gently. I don't know, she answered honestly. It seems sincere, but she also seemed sincere when she came here saying she wanted to meet us. It's normal to be confused, dear. Part of me wants to believe she's changed, that she really cares about us. Another part is afraid of being hurt again. I held her tight. You don't have to decide anything right now. You can just watch, see if her actions match her words over time. Sophia nodded carefully, folding the letter and putting it in her treasure box where she kept her favorite drawings and small keepsakes. The weeks turned into months. Laura continued to send letters, 1 every 2 weeks. Matthew still refused to read them, but he no longer objected when I saved them instead of sending them back. Maybe one day, he said once, shrugging. Sophia, on the other hand, began to reply occasionally. Short, careful letters maintaining a safe emotional distance but establishing a line of communication. I watched this slow development with caution. Part of me wanted to believe Laura was really changing, that she was finally maturing and taking responsibility for her actions. Another part feared it was just a long-term strategy to eventually get what she wanted, the inheritance money. 6 months after the hearing, the restraining order was reviewed. As there had been no new attempts by Laura to approach physically or cause problems, the judge modified the order, allowing supervised meetings if Matthew and Sophia agreed. Sophia was cautiously open to the idea. Matthew initially refused flat out, but after much reflection, he agreed to be present at least once, mainly to support his sister. "I'm not doing this for her," he made clear. "I'm doing this for Sophia. I don't want her to face this alone." The meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon at a quiet cafe near our house. We were all nervous for different reasons. Sophia changed her clothes 3 times, undecided on the image she wanted to project. Matthew maintained a stoic expression, but I could see his tension in the way his fingers constantly drummed on the table. I tried to appear calm, but my stomach was in knots. Laura arrived on time, a rarity for her. She was thinner than the last time we saw her, with visible dark circles and simple clothes, very different from the elegant look she had sported in court. She seemed genuinely nervous. "Hello," she said, simply standing by our table. "Hi," Sophia replied, her voice almost a whisper. Matthew just nodded, his arms crossed defensively. "Can I sit down?" Laura asked. "Please," I replied, indicating the empty chair. The first few minutes were painfully awkward. I ordered coffee for everyone, hoping the familiar ritual would break the tension a bit. Are you both doing well?" Laura finally asked, looking hesitantly at her children. "We are," Sophia replied. "I joined the art club at school. We're having an exhibition at the end of the semester." A small smile appeared on Laura's face. "That's great. I always liked to draw too when I was your age." "You mentioned that in the letter," Sophia said. "Yes, I kept all your replies," Laura confessed. "I read them when I'm having bad days." Matthew, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Why did you really come back the truth this time?" Laura swallowed, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question. "The truth is complicated," she began slowly. "Yes, I found out about the inheritance. And yes, initially I thought it could solve my financial problems. I was desperate, drowning in debt, about to lose my apartment." She paused, looking at the coffee cup between her hands. "But when I saw you again, after all that time, something changed. I realized what I had lost, what I had thrown away. It wasn't just money. It was you, your lives, your childhood, your first steps, first words, first days of school, everything a mother should witness." Matthew still looked skeptical, but I noticed his arms were no longer crossed so tightly. "And how do we know you're not lying again?" he asked. "You don't," Laura replied simply. "Only time will tell. I'm not asking you to trust me now. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can change, that I am changing." "What are you doing now?" Sophia asked. "I mean for a living, for work." "I'm working as an administrative assistant at a medical clinic," Laura replied. "It's not much, but it pays the bills for my new apartment, much smaller than the last one. I'm also going to therapy twice a week." This took me by surprise. Laura had always resisted the idea of therapy in the past. "That's good," I commented cautiously. "It was the condition my friend Denise set for letting me stay at her place after I lost my apartment," Laura explained with a small smile. "She said I needed to work on my problems if I didn't want to keep ruining my life and everyone else's." She was right. The conversation flowed a little more easily after that. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkward silence, difficult questions, raw emotions, but it was a start. When it was time to leave, Sophia surprised everyone by standing up and giving Laura a quick hug. It was awkward and brief, but real. "I can show you some of my drawings next time," she offered shyly. "I'd love that," Laura replied, visibly moved. Matthew didn't go as far as a hug, but he extended his hand for a formal shake. "I still don't trust you," he said directly, "but I'm willing to watch and see if you've really changed." "That's fair," Laura replied. "More than I deserve, in fact." On the way home, I reflected on the meeting. It had been better than I expected, but I knew the road ahead would still be long and difficult. Trust once broken takes a long time to rebuild, if it can ever be fully restored. "What did you two think?" I asked as I drove back home. "She seemed different," Sophia replied after a moment of thought. "She seemed more human," Matthew added, surprising me with his comment. "Less like that cold woman from the courtroom, and more like someone who's really trying." I smiled at him in the rearview mirror. Matthew was always the more analytical, the most protective of the three. His slight change in attitude was significant. "Do you want to continue with these meetings?" I asked, wanting to leave the decision entirely in their hands. Sophia nodded quickly. "I do. I think maybe we need this to understand." "I can join some of them," Matthew agreed more reservedly. "I don't promise I'll go to all of them, but I'll try." In the following weeks, we established a routine. Bi-monthly meetings at the same cafe, always under my supervision. Laura never missed a meeting, even when she caught a bad cold and showed up wrapped in a scarf, determined not to break the commitment. Over time, I noticed subtle changes. Sophia began to talk more about her art, bringing her sketchbook to show Laura, who reacted with genuine enthusiasm. Matthew, initially resistant to any personal conversation, gradually began to share small parts of his life. A university project, a book he was reading. Laura was changing too. The calculating, manipulative woman we saw in court seemed to have disappeared, giving way to someone more humble, more reflective. She spoke openly about her therapy, about the difficulties she was facing in rebuilding her life, about the regret she felt for the choices she had made. "My therapist says I have abandonment issues I never resolved," she confessed in one of the meetings. "My dad left us when I was little. Remember, Mom? I think I repeated the pattern with my own children. It's hard to face that." During those months, I kept a constant watch, observing every interaction, analyzing Laura's every word, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. But as time went on, I began to consider a possibility that once seemed impossible. Maybe Laura was really changing. A year after the hearing, when the restraining order expired completely, Laura asked for permission to invite her children to lunch at her small apartment. "I understand if it's too soon," she told me on the phone. "Or if you want to come too. I just thought, well, maybe it's a next step." I discussed the idea with Matthew and Sophia. To my surprise, both seemed open to the possibility. "I think I'm ready to see where she lives," said Matthew, who was now 20 and increasingly independent. "I can take Sophia and keep an eye on things." "I really want to go," added Sophia, now 18. "I want to see if she really has those pictures of us she mentioned." On the Sunday set for the lunch, I helped them get ready and drove them to the address Laura had provided, a small building in a modest neighborhood very different from the elegant condo where she lived when she reappeared in our lives. "Call if you need me to pick you up early," I instructed, still apprehensive. "I'll be back at 5 as we agreed." "Everything will be fine, Grandma," Sophia assured me, kissing my cheek. "We're grown-ups now." I watched them walk to the building entrance where Laura was waiting for them with a nervous smile. It was a moment I never imagined I would see. My grandchildren, now young adults, voluntarily visiting the mother who had abandoned them. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Every few minutes I checked my phone, expecting a distress message, but nothing came. When I returned at 5, I found them on the sidewalk in front of the building, chatting animatedly. "How did it go?" I asked as soon as they got in the car. "It was good," Matthew replied, seeming slightly surprised by his own assessment. "Her apartment is really small but cozy. She really does have pictures of us everywhere," Sophia added enthusiastically. "Even that one of us at Matthew's high school graduation, she must have asked someone to take a picture of the school paper that published it online." "And did she cook for you?" "No," Matthew laughed. "She almost burned the chicken, but in the end it was edible." I listened to their stories with a mix of relief and a strange feeling I was slow to identify: jealousy. For 15 years, I had been the only mother figure in these two's lives. Now, suddenly, I was sharing that role, however minimally, with the woman who abandoned them. It was a petty feeling, I knew. What should matter was their well-being, not my wounded pride. But it was human, and I allowed myself to feel it momentarily before letting it go. In the following months, a new family dynamic began to form. Laura became a part of Matthew and Sophia's lives. Not as their primary mother, that role was still mine, but as a kind of aunt or older friend who was gradually earning a place in their hearts. She came to dinner at our house occasionally. She attended Matthew's college graduation, sitting discreetly at the back, clapping proudly when he received his diploma. She helped Sophia prepare her portfolio for art school. At no time did she mention the inheritance or ask for money. In fact, when Matthew turned 21 and gained access to his share, Laura made sure to clarify that she expected nothing from him. "That money is yours," she said during his birthday dinner, "for your future, your dreams. You don't owe me anything." It was at that moment I realized something I thought impossible had happened. I had begun to believe in Laura's transformation. 2 years after the hearing, during a family dinner, which now included Laura, my daughter asked to speak with me privately. We went out to the porch, the night sky dotted with stars above us. "Mom, I never formally apologized," she began, her voice trembling, "for everything I did. for abandoning the kids, for trying to manipulate the situation to get money, for all the accusations I made against you. I looked at my daughter, no longer the reckless young woman who had left 2 small children on my doorstep, nor the calculating woman who had shown up with a lawyer 15 years later, but someone new, someone who had faced her demons and begun the hard work of redemption. There was a time when I thought I could never forgive you, I admitted. What you did caused so much suffering, so much pain. I know, she murmured, lowering her head, but I also see how you've tried to change, to build something new and true with your children. I paused, gathering courage for what I needed to say. I forgive you, Laura. She looked up, her eyes full of tears. Even after everything, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the past, I explained. It means I'm choosing not to let the pain continue to define our relationship. You are my daughter, and you always will be, with all your mistakes and successes, Laura sobbed. And for the first time in many years, I hugged my daughter as a mother again. It was an imperfect hug, full of the scars of our shared past, but also of a cautious hope for the future. When we went back inside, Matthew and Sophia watched us curiously. "Is everything okay?" Sophia asked, worried. "It is," I replied, smiling through my tears. "We're just settling some old accounts." That night, looking at the scene in front of me, Matthew telling a story from college, Sophia showing her new illustrations, Laura listening attentively to both, I felt a strange sense of completeness. Our family would never be perfect or conventional. We would always carry the scars of abandonment, of betrayal, of lost time. But we were each in our own way, finding a path to healing. 3 years after the hearing that changed our lives, I sit on my porch, looking at the garden I planted when Matthew and Sophia were little. The rose bushes that Sophia helped me plant when she was 6 are in full bloom. The wooden bench that Matthew built in his school carpentry project at age 12 stands firm under the shade of the custard apple tree. This garden, like our family, grew despite adversity, finding strength in deep roots and resilience in the storms. Matthew, now 22, is finishing his master's degree in engineering. He graduated with honors in his bachelor's degree and used part of his inheritance to invest in a small apartment near the university. He is a serious, responsible young man with meticulous plans for the future. The scars of abandonment are still there. His difficulty trusting, his fear of depending emotionally on others. But he works on those issues, attending therapy regularly. Sophia, at 20, has blossomed as an artist. She is in her 2nd year of visual arts school, her talent recognized by professors who predict a bright future for her. Unlike her brother, Sophia opened up more easily to rebuilding a relationship with Laura. Maybe because she was younger when she was abandoned, her memories are less sharp, the pain less ingrained. As for Laura, well, she surprised me. She kept her job at the medical clinic, was promoted to administrative manager. She continues in her small apartment, living modestly. Therapy became a constant part of her life, and through it, she began to unearth and confront the destructive patterns that had dominated her for so long. Our relationship also changed. The wounds haven't completely disappeared. I doubt they ever will, but we found a new balance. She calls me regularly, comes for dinner on Sundays, asks for advice when facing difficulties. Sometimes I still find myself watching her, cautiously waiting to see signs of the old manipulative and selfish Laura, but those moments are becoming rarer. What I see now is a woman determined to repair what can be repaired, to build something new from the ruins of her past choices. I often think about the decision I made in that courtroom 3 years ago. I could have pushed for criminal charges against my daughter. I could have permanently closed the door to any possibility of reconciliation. The judge would have granted my request given the evidence of her fraud attempt. But I chose to leave a small crack open, not for her initially, but for Matthew and Sophia, who might one day want to know their biological mother on their own terms. It was a risky decision based more on instinct than reason. Looking back now, I see it was the right decision, not just for my grandchildren, but for all of us. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it creates space for a different future. A few weeks ago, I found Sophia looking at an old photo album. She stopped at a picture of me holding her as a baby, an exhausted but happy smile on my face. "You know, Grandma," she told me thoughtfully, "it always seems strange when people say family is just who shares your blood, because you showed me that family is who stays when everyone else leaves." Her words moved me deeply, because in the end, that's what our journey had been. A redefinition of what it means to be family. It's not genetics that creates the strongest bonds, but the daily choices. Getting up at dawn to soothe a fever, attending countless school presentations, holding trembling hands during life's storms. It's love manifested in concrete actions, not in empty words or biological obligations. Laura is learning that now belatedly. She will never be to Matthew and Sophia what I was. the person who raised them, who was there at every important moment, who built the foundation of who they are. That time cannot be recovered, but she is building something new with them, something that, although different, has its own value. Last week, Sophia showed me a drawing she had made for a school project. It was a family portrait. I was in the center, Matthew and Sophia by my side, and Laura a little further away, but undeniably part of the composition. "This is how I see our family now," she explained. "It's not perfect or conventional, but it's ours." Matthew still keeps more emotional distance from Laura, and that's perfectly understandable. His memories of abandonment are more vivid, his pain deeper. But even he recently admitted that it was good to see she was really trying. When I reflect on these 15 years raising my grandchildren, the challenges, the joys, the constant worries, I regret nothing. Even in the most difficult moments when money was tight, when the children were sick, when I was too exhausted to think clearly, I knew I was exactly where I should be doing exactly what I should be doing. The yellow envelope I kept for so many years full of proof of Laura's abandonment and later of her attempted manipulation is still in my drawer. I didn't throw it away because it's part of our story, a reminder of the journey we traveled. But I don't open it anymore. I don't need to. Our story is now being written not in documents kept in yellowish envelopes, but in the small daily interactions, in the Sunday lunches, in the exchanged messages in the birthdays celebrated together. It's an imperfect story full of scars and patches of painful chapters that can never be rewritten. But it's also a story of redemption, of second chances of a love that, though tested by the strongest winds, found ways to endure and grow. If there's one lesson I learned on this journey, it's that true love is never simple or easy. It's complex, often painful, demanding sacrifices we never imagined making. But it's also incredibly resilient, capable of surviving the most terrible storms, of finding light in the darkest corners, of building bridges over the deepest chasms. As a grandmother who became a mother out of necessity, as a woman who faced her own daughter in court to protect those she loved, as a person who eventually found room in her heart to forgive the unforgivable, I can say with certainty, love in all its imperfect and messy forms is worth every battle, every tear, every sleepless night. And as I watch my garden on this quiet afternoon, the voices of Matthew and Sophia coming from the kitchen, where they're preparing Sunday lunch waiting for Laura, who should arrive soon, I feel a peace I never thought I'd find. It's not the happy ending of a fairy tale. It's something better, more real. It's life with all its complexities and contradictions, its unexpected joys, and its unavoidable pains. It's the story of a family that broke and somehow found a way to rebuild itself. Different, imperfect, but authentically ours. And for today, that is more than enough. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe to Elderly Stories and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll wait for you there. The following summer, we threw a small party to celebrate Sophia's 21st birthday. I decorated the house with colorful lanterns and ribbons, her favorites since childhood. Matthew came early to help, bringing his girlfriend Juliet, a medical student he had met on campus. Laura arrived carrying a homemade cake, something she had learned to make recently in the baking classes she had started attending. "It's not perfect," she apologized, showing where the frosting had dripped slightly, "but it's from the heart." The gift table filled up as guests arrived. Friends from Sophia's college neighbors who watched her grow up, teachers who recognized her talent early on. Among the packages, I noticed a simple wrapping with Laura's card. When Sophia finally opened it after blowing out the candles and making her secret wish, we were all surprised. It was an old, well-preserved box filled with small drawing notebooks. "They're my sketchbooks from when I was your age," Laura explained shyly. "I thought maybe you'd like to see that your talent comes from somewhere." Sophia flipped through the pages carefully, examining the hesitant strokes that eventually transformed into more confident drawings. "You were good," she commented, genuinely impressed. "Why did you stop?" Laura shrugged, a gesture so much like Sophia's that I almost laughed. "Life happened, work responsibilities, and maybe I didn't believe in myself enough." She smiled at her daughter. "I hope you never give up like I did. Not out of guilt or obligation, but in something shared and authentic." Later that night, when most of the guests had left, I found Laura in the kitchen quietly washing the dishes. "You don't have to do this," I told her, grabbing a towel to dry. "I know," she replied, "but I want to help." She washed a few more cups before continuing. "You gave them a wonderful life, Mom. Better than I ever could have, even if I had stayed." I didn't answer immediately, absorbing the weight of her admission. It wasn't easy, I confessed finally. There were times when I didn't know if I was doing the right thing, if I was enough for them. It was more than enough, she said, her eyes meeting mine. You were more than enough. We worked in silence for a few minutes, finding comfort in the simple routine. You know, Laura said eventually, in therapy we talk a lot about regrets. The therapist always asks what I would do differently if I could go back in time. And what do you answer? I used to say that I would have stayed with the children, that I would have been the mother they deserved. But recently I realized that maybe things happened the way they were supposed to. I looked at her surprised. Don't get me wrong, she continued quickly. I'm not saying it was right to abandon them. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and it always will be. But when I see who they became under your care, her voice wavered a bit. Maybe they were destined to have you as their mother, not me. It was the first time Laura had admitted without bitterness or resentment that my role in the children's lives was more than temporary or a substitute, that I was in fact the mother they needed. You still have a place in their lives, I replied gently. Different from mine, but important. She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. I'm grateful for that, more than you can imagine. Outside, we heard laughter. Sophia was showing her new sketchbooks to Matthew and Juliet, all sitting on the garden bench under the colorful lights. Should we join them? Laura asked. Yes, I replied, hanging up the dish towel. It's too beautiful a night to stay inside. We walked out into the garden together, where the conversation flowed easily between generations, between past and present, between old pains and new joys. As I sat down watching my family, not the family I planned, but the family fate gave me, I felt a deep gratitude for the strange twists of life that brought us here. 15 years ago, when 2 scared children arrived on my doorstep, I never imagined we would all be together like this one day. I never dreamed that abandonment would eventually transform into a story of redemption. But maybe that's what life really teaches us if we have the courage to pay attention, that our greatest wounds often contain the seeds of our deepest healing. That the hardest paths sometimes lead us to the most beautiful destinations, that even stories that begin with pain can with time and effort end with something like peace. It's not a perfect ending. There are no perfect endings in real stories, but it's an ending that despite everything I can embrace with an open heart, because in the end it's not about having a perfect family. It's about loving imperfectly but completely those that life puts in our path. And in that, at least I can say, I succeeded. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll wait for you there.